Thank you. Thank you, Helga. Thank you for this introduction, and also let me thank you for the work we've done together. I think this has been remarkable, and that has been always teamwork. What is good of this meetings, this ambassadors conference we have every year, is that it allows us to come together. I see many of you, well, first of all, it's good to see so many familiar and I would say friends faces around the room. Many of you I've met during my visits, but also many that are working here in the headquarters, not only in the EEAS, but also in the Commission, in our European services and institutions across the streets and the squares. And it's good to come together from time to time and see where we stand. And if we have managed to develop and make it so recognizable, the European way of working, I think this has been because of good, dedicated teams we have deployed, and we will deploy in this coming years. It's true, this is my last conference, but this is for many of you the first. And for many of you, work just starts in the new capacity, or some of you simply change location, and with the change of location, a lot changes. What I know for sure is that I leave the European Union foreign policy in very good hands. That is in your hands, that is in the hands of great professionals who work at the EEAS and in delegations, also all the teams that you have led, or you continue to lead, or you will lead on the ground. Let me use this opportunity, as we are web streamed, also to thank them, because I know that behind the work of the High Representative, there's also always the work of heads of delegation. I know that behind the work of myself and the heads of delegation, there's also a lot of dedicated work from the teams you work with on the ground. So let me thank them for the work they're doing, sometimes in very difficult circumstances. And of course, I know that I leave the EU foreign and security policy in good hands with Josep Borrell, that I consider an excellent minister so far, and hopefully, obviously, the Parliament has the last word, an excellent future High Representative. In his hands, I think the European Union foreign and security policy will be not only safe, but also will be able to grow and develop as much, if not even more, than we've managed to develop it so far. In these 5 years, we've seen the European Union presence in the world growing and evolving. This summer, I have inaugurated 2 new delegations in Central Asia and in the Gulf. And this is just one sign of many others. Many other signs of a growing presence in the world and a growing demand for the European Union presence in the world. It's not just about planting the European Union flag in new places. It is also about that. So I invite you with this to make us visible. Sometimes there are moments where we need to go submarine a little bit, especially to survive difficult tensions. But it's good to be visible and to be recognizable as the European Union everywhere we are. But it's not just about that. It is about our new role in the world of today and the expectations that our partners and friends and interlocutors have about us. I think we are very clear this now. The world expects the European Union to play a leading role. And the question you are asked often, and I am asked often, is are you aware of that? Are you ready for that? Are you willing to play that role? But the expectation on the other side is always clear. It's for us to play a major and leading role. The world expects us to be a point of reference, a peace builder, a security provider, and a voice of rationality, I would say sometimes even common sense, in a very difficult world. In the very last months, I've heard this call at all the corners of the world. Just a couple of examples. In Mozambique, where I was for the signing of an historic peace deal just a couple of weeks ago, because we have followed the negotiations all through these 5 years, and they are now asking us to be close to them, to help them implement this final agreement and win the peace. That's sometimes more difficult than making the agreement itself. In Southeast Asia, or in Ukraine, in Africa, or in the Gulf, what I've heard in these recent months, all our partners asking us to keep engaging with them, as we've done in these years, to keep supporting mediation, free and fair trade, or the fight against climate change. And these are just examples of why people see in us, our partners see in us, a vital point of reference. The world needs us today, and it is in our interest to keep a consistent and very strong engagement in world affairs, in every single region of the world. I know we often have the feeling, at least I do, and I guess you might have that feeling as well, that the world is going in the wrong direction, that everything becomes more difficult every single day that goes by. And I guess this is not just an impression. Sometimes developments we're seeing on the ground or in world geopolitics are not the ones we wish to see, and sometimes are not the ones we work for. Sometimes you manage to achieve results, sometimes you don't. My natural reaction in these situations, it's because I'm an optimist, otherwise you don't manage to make this work. I think it's in the job description, is imagine what if we didn't work for achieving a better result. It could have been even worse. I don't know if this is an optimistic or pessimistic approach, but anyway, I think this is what can guide us in our daily work. We always try to give a positive contribution, even when we have the feeling that the world is going in the wrong direction. Because our actions do make a difference. Sometimes they don't make the headlines, and sometimes it's even good they don't make the headlines, because sometimes you have to exercise quiet diplomacy. Sometimes it will only bear fruit after several years, and perseverance and patience is what we need in many occasions. But what we do has always an impact on thousands of people, and I think you and the teams you work with in the delegations, or you will work with in the delegations, are the first ones to see this, the impact that our work has on daily lives of the people we meet on a daily basis. And the work we do is always key and sometimes vital to so many of our partners around the world. Because the more our world becomes difficult, the more our partners need us to be at their side on the path of cooperation and the difficult search of win-win solutions. I imagine that has happened to many of you that have been head of delegation already for some time, to hear this sentence that I've heard so often, especially in the last few years. We stand on this position, but obviously if you have the same position, it's easier for us to keep it. This is a request that we hear from many corners of the world, and this is why I believe we need to be aware of the power we have as European Union. That is, again, never sufficient alone, but vital for many others that see in us a point of reference simply because we're bigger than most of our partners, we're stronger than most of our partners in the world. So today I will try to focus on a few success stories, but also on a few lessons learned of these last years. The first one is on security and defense. The lesson I've learned here is that, as Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. 5 years ago, everyone told me that greater integration on defense would be simply impossible in the current political environment or in any future one, and people were even taking it as a joke. Oh yes, you will try, everybody has tried, but it will never fly, it will never work. We managed to put in place the European Union defense, the fundamental building blocks of it, precisely in one of our union's most difficult moments. And this is because in the world of today, I believe finally, at the end of the day, our member states understood that investing in our union, especially in this field of security and defense, is the smartest thing we can do. We don't always do the smartest thing, but sometimes it works, sometimes we do. And here I would like also to thank all our militaries that have helped us building this work on the European Union defense that I believe is vital for also further political perspectives of integration in the European Union. So today we're investing in the European defense industry, in European capabilities and European technologies, but we've also upgraded our ability to act together with the Unified Command Center for our training missions, with common trainings, with the Civilian Compact, also by showing that it is possible to deploy a major military operation in just 2 months, as we did with Operation Sophia. That remains, for me, one of the things I'm most proud of, regardless of the current difficulties. Our defense cooperation has advanced more than anyone would have imagined in the past. But our collective potential on defense issues is even greater and is still to be fulfilled. And I am sure that the new president of the Commission, with her background, will be the first one to push in that direction. Last week, at the informal meeting of defense ministers in Finland, we discussed, for instance, the idea of a coordinated maritime presence in areas of strategic interest to the European Union. Exploring our European potential is only a matter of political will. And I know for sure that, again, not only Ursula, but also Josep Borrell and Charles Michel will have the determination and the courage to consolidate our work on the defense of the European Union. The world is asking us to be a global security provider, as I mentioned, a cooperative one at the service of peace, but also, and here I come to the second point I would like to highlight, also, and even more so probably, to be a champion of multilateralism. Europe is a cooperative and multilateral power by definition. At a time when the idea of a cooperative global order has come under increasing pressure, we have invested in multilateralism like never before, and we have always invested in multilateralism. This is first and foremost about the work we have done with the United Nations and in the UN framework. We support UN mediations from Syria to Libya and elsewhere. We work to achieve and implement the Paris Agreement on climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals. We have saved the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees from collapsing, and some work still needs to be done. We are working to preserve the deal with Iran, and that is, as you all know, a UN Security Council resolution. And we are exploring innovative forms of collaboration with the United Nations. Think of our trilateral cooperation with the UN and the African Union. Covers many different aspects, but a key, vital test for it is the work we do together with them to empty detention centers in Libya. But multilateralism is not just about the UN system. The UN system is at its core, but it is a global approach to preventing and solving conflicts. In every context, on every single issue, global challenge, crisis, but also opportunities. We try to invest always in multilateral cooperative approaches, because this is the only way to find just and sustainable solutions to the problems of our times. We always put our convening power to the service of multilateralism, trying to bring the relevant regional and global powers to the negotiating table or setting up a contact group. We always try to build the space for dialogue, to create the conditions for a mediated solution, with an inclusive approach and building processes that are based on full ownership of all those involved, the people, not just the governments or institutions. This is how we achieved the nuclear deal with Iran back then. This is also how we are trying to save it today. It was the original idea when we, back then, set up the International Syria Support Group, and later with the Brussels conferences on Syria, where we bring together different players to try and achieve a political but also humanitarian objective. This is why we invested so much in the Middle East Quartet, and we continue to do so in difficult circumstances. But again, imagine if we didn't do it. It is the idea behind the International Contact Group on Venezuela, the Quartet with the UN, the Arab League, and the African Union for Libya, the regional meetings we organized on Afghanistan, and the list could continue. In all cases, we always made clear that our efforts were aimed at contributing to the United Nations work, being the United Nations for us the ultimate framework, the center of gravity for all multilateral work. Some of our initiatives have been successful, as I said, some other have been less successful, but this has been a truly systemic contribution. We've always invested in building a framework for cooperation where it did not exist or where it was challenged. Third theme that I would like to mention is the partnership approach. Here, I have to say this is something on which your work on the ground can contribute enormously, and for those of you that have been already heads of delegation, you have contributed enormously, because partnership is built on trust, even sometimes on personal relations and contacts, and the sense of being present every single day of the work. I've always believed that Europe is a global power, but being a global power does not mean that we alone can solve all the issues of our times. No global power can do that. We all need partners. We need to join forces with those who share our same interests and values. And I will make just one example on our new partnership with Africa. This is something I'm really proud of. In these years, we have realized that the old donor-recipient mentality, or even a partnership based purely on management of migration flows, simply doesn't work. It's not what responds to the ambitions, the aspirations, the needs of our interlocutors, and so wouldn't work, wouldn't fly. We moved from simply working for Africa to working with Africa. And I can say that today, probably our partnership with Africa, starting with the African Union, but also the sub-regional organizations and the individual countries, is one of the strongest ones we have. It's even a friendship, it's not just a partnership. And our African friends, as we name each other, our brothers and sisters, are coming up with African solutions to African problems. And we're putting our strength, also our resources, behind these solutions. And this is what we've done, for instance, with the G5 Sahel, and its joint military force. I was there just a couple of months ago. This is the logic that underpins also our external investment plan, the largest ever investment program for Africa. And this is also the spirit of the Abidjan summit we had a few years ago, and the one that I already mentioned, the Trilateral Cooperation with the African Union and the United Nations. This approach, the partnership approach, makes us more credible, and it makes us different from most of other great powers. It is so powerful to meet your partner and say, I have no hidden agenda. This is what we share, this is what we disagree upon. We can start our working partnership on a fair basis where everything is transparent and you can trust us. Sometimes it's difficult. What is difficult, you see it, and you see it a lot, but you don't get hidden surprises on the way. And I think this is very much appreciated in these times of unpredictable shifts. So preserving the partnership approach based on shared interests, mutual respect, transparency, I believe will be essential to our credibility and also to the effectiveness of our external action. Fourth issue I'd like to touch upon. When I took office, our focus was mainly, and probably rightly so, on responding to crises and emergencies. In these years, we have shifted the focus on preventing crises, tackling their long-term effects, and also on investing in the positive stories around the world. We have put resilience at the core of our action to make states and societies more capable of absorbing external and even internal shocks. I could make many examples, but I will only name one, right here on our continent. The crisis in Ukraine is still not over, but in these 5 years, Ukraine has come a very long way, and it is today a much more resilient country than it was 5 years ago. Our work with Ukraine has a very strong security component, rightly so, but we've also invested immensely in the country's human development. We have helped create jobs, built and rebuilt infrastructure. We've liberalized access to the European Union, invested in exchanges between our people, between our universities. In these 5 years, we've put together for Ukraine the largest support package in the history of the European Union. And it is thanks to that if the country has not collapsed and has managed to move on and try to get out of this crisis today on a new basis. And in spite of immense challenges, Ukraine today is a much stronger country than it used to be. I remember 2014, dramatic year when I started. We were definitely not in the same place. And in general terms, investing on the good stories we see in the world, acknowledging the positive developments, because sometimes we are perceived, rightly so, as the ones pointing out at the difficulties, the work that still needs to be done. You need to do more on reforms, on human rights, recognizing and acknowledging the positive steps that countries, governments, authorities, civil society has made or is making in different parts of the world, I think is an integral part of our work. Going and putting our flag not only on managing or solving crises, acute hotspots, but also going in places where there might be no need to be on the headlines, but you can make a lot of impact, positive one, in sometimes it's faraway places in the world, but good friends that simply need you to be there and say, we don't have problems among us. We are friends, we're partners, it works. I think this helps building a sort of network of partnerships based on same values and same interests around the world. So I think Another lesson that I've learned in these years is to dedicate time and energy not only to the problems, but also to acknowledging the positive stories, the positive friendships we have developed around the world. Because it's like in life, if you don't nourish friendship, it risks to die. You need to invest a little bit in that as well. When we Europeans decide to mobilize all our tools, the power of our engagement is immense. And sometimes I have the feeling, as Elga was saying, that we underestimate it and that we don't fully realize how powerful we can be. This is true at the other side of the world, and I'm sure some of you that have served already have good stories to share on this, but clearly even more so here on our continent. Just think of the Balkans. We have a clear interest in bringing the entire Balkans inside the European Union. And we all know that this is a long process, a complicated one, always interesting and lively, will take time, will take a lot of problem solving, will take a lot of political commitment on all sides and dedication. It took 25 years to solve the name issue between Greece and North Macedonia. But now it's done, thanks to courage, leadership, perseverance, and also thanks to the European Union constant support and encouragement. In these years, this has been achieved. The same is true, I believe, for all the Balkans. We will need courage, leadership, and perseverance, and keeping a very strong daily presence there every single day. But if we continue to engage, we will finally reap the immense opportunities that unification of our continent could create. Reconciliation, first and foremost, because as I said several times, this is probably the only place where enlargement goes back to the original value of the European Union built up, which is making peace where war was. That was the original idea of the European Union. In the Balkans, that is it. How can countries that were killing each other, literally, just 20 years ago, can come together under the same roof? The answer is in the same roof. Being together is the only perspective that can make them live really in reconciliation and peace. But also, for many of us, for some of us, so important, even more than reconciliation in some cases, economic development, trade, social development, security. This would benefit not just the Balkans, but all of us. We need it. We, the European Union, need it. Also because this is countries that are not outside of our geographical boundaries. They're all neighboring EU member states. So it's not even an issue of enlargement, it's an issue of real reunification of our continent. This is time, I think, to be wise, consistent, and take the next step forward, the unification of our European family. And let me say, on a personal note, I'm really convinced that if we don't do it, I am sure we would regret it in a few years' time. One final point. In these 5 years, our external action has changed. The nature of our work has changed. Diplomacy is not the same as it used to be. We experience it every day. We have to be more flexible and creative, and sometimes consider normal things that were not even thinkable a few years ago. Today, we know that engaging with governments is essential, has always been, but is not enough. Civil society, private sector are essential interlocutors if we want to have a real impact on the ground, but also local authorities. Think of the work we're doing on climate change, how much relevant the work is with authorities or institutions that are not state institutions. In these years, we've expanded our action well beyond the domain of traditional diplomacy. And I'm very proud of the work we've managed to do with limited resources. And I'm also proud of the good cooperation we've established with the Commission services on this. We've invested in cultural diplomacy, in economic diplomacy, in science diplomacy, and the list could continue. These are all fields where it's only natural for us to use the potential we have as European Union, putting together all the different strands of work we already have in place, but just to project them at the external action service level. We have engaged with religious leaders, religious communities. Just days ago in Finland, we met again with the members of the Global Tech Panel we have created to engage with the world of technology. And here again, the list could continue. There's a universe of interlocutors out there beyond institutions that are very much eager to engage and work with us in many different fields. And I think this is a potential that we cannot waste. As our interlocutors change and as the world changes, we also evolve. In these 5 years, we have realized that we must mobilize our full potential as a union, synchronizing all our tools, from diplomacy to trade policy, from humanitarian aid to our militaries, and of course, our internal and external policies. No one understands this better than those of you that have worked in the delegations before, I believe. For our partners in the world, there is no difference between the EEAS, the Commissions, DGs, Council, European Parliament. It's the European Union. It's Europe. On that side, they hear one subject, one player that speaks. We need to make sure that the message that different institutions deliver is coherent. Because for our interlocutors, I believe also for our citizens, there's no difference between the different institutions. This is something we have to own ourselves, first and foremost. You represent the European Union, not one institution or the other. And institutions, at the end of the day, are at the service of each other and of the European citizens and of our purpose in the world. So I believe that it is clear, it has been improved in these years. We are Europe, we are the European Union. We must act in a coherent and consistent manner if we want to be credible and have a real impact in the world. And this is what makes a true difference in the way our union works. More than our rules, more than our institutional structures, it is our political will that moves the union forward. And let me also thank here the commissioners that have worked with me in these 5 years, because the group of commissioners in these years has met regularly every month, and has, I think, had an impact also in the coherence of the policies we put in place. I've said it over and over again. It's the political will that moves the union forward. The European Union is what we make of it. It needs everyone's contribution. It needs every nation, every institution, every single citizen. It needs real people to breathe life into it. Otherwise, it risks becoming an empty shell. And you are the European Union face in the world, as difficult as it can be, but also as exciting and potentially rewarding as it can be. And as I've had the privilege of being for this last 5 years, you can be the point of reference. First of all, for all Europeans in the countries you're posted in, and together we can be also a point of reference for our partners all around the world. In these years, the world has looked at us, searching for a guide, for a friend, for someone to work with, sometimes just for someone to talk to. And I believe this is something that we need to fully understand. The more conflictual the world becomes, the more difficult this work becomes, the more important our role becomes for all those around the world that are searching for a partnership, cooperative approach for peace and security, but also for social and economic development in a sustainable manner. So you are and will be the women and men that make this possible every single day, together with your teams, in every part of this world that is our common house. I want to thank those of you that have worked already as head of delegations or in other institutions in these years. I want to thank you for all you have done, but also, and most importantly, I want to thank all of you for what you will do in these years ahead. For me, it has been an honor and a real pleasure to work with you in these 5 years, and I can only wish you all the best for the interest of the European Union, but also for the interest of the entire world. Thank you.